So at the beginning of the dream, Rivers describes that he saw something disfigured and he referred to it as a grotesque parody. This symbolizes the patience and the guilt that Rivers is feeling towards them. He feels his treatment has inflicted so much emotional pain on them that it has manifested physically. And this is really ironic because Yellen's treatment inflicts physical pain on the patient, which later on manifests emotionally. So all this pain applied into the patient causes them to be disfigured or deformed one way or another. And this is symbolized through the image of a grotesque parody. So Rivers then goes on to describe the tonsils of Callan in his dream, and he refers to them as being great swollen purple eggs. It's very descriptive and it paints a very vivid picture in the reader's mind. However, the description itself of great swollen purple eggs, it's not very medical in its terms, and thus the language symbolizes and represents the fact that Rivers' treatment is not very medical or visceral. So to sum up the similarities between Yelland and Rivers, it's obvious that they're both psychiatrists and they work at mental institutions to help the men who have been traumatized by war. And one other similarity is that both doctors, one way or another, are silencing their patients. Although it doesn't seem like it because Rivers' method is curing them through making them speak, and Yellen is curing mutism through electricity. However, after some realization, it is explored in the novel that the patient's not opening up and being mute was merely a manifestation of their protests and passive aggression and rebellion. So by curing them of this, Rivers and Yellen are silencing their protests, causing them to conform once again. So both Rivers and Yellen inflict some kind of pain unto their patients, whether it be emotional or physical. And both treatments are successful and unsuccessful at the same time. Yellen's method causes them to speak instantly, only prolonging their conditions that will, in the long term, resurface. Rivers, on the other hand, his method causes them to talk about what happened right now, and so it's short-term failure because they're digging up all their traumas and stuff, and so they're lulling about what happened. However, in the long term, their recovery will be more thorough. Both treatments cause the patient's traumas to manifest one way or another, and this is also symbolized and explored through Rivers' dreams. The differences between the two are that their methods are clearly different. Rivers takes a gentler path that is less visceral, whereas Yellen goes all out in one shot that has everything to do with scientific reasoning. The pain that Rivers inflicts onto his patient is emotional, whereas the pain Yellen inflicts onto his patients is physical. And the whole structure in which Barker has set up the novel and the introduction of Yelland shows how contrasting these characters really are. For Yelland is only introduced towards the end, emphasizing on the vast difference between himself and Rivers. And the way in which Rivers speaks to his patients in a level tone of genuine care and concern, whereas Yellen speaks condescendingly towards them, telling them what to do. And Rivers is referred to as a male mother, whereas Yelland is referred to as godlike. And through the dream, it shows that Rivers feels guilty about what is being done. However, Yelland clearly does not, as he expects the patients to be grateful to him forever as he has cured them. And Rivers sees his patients as actual human beings with families because he's met Burns's parents, so he understands his background, and lives before the war. An example would be Sassoon, when Sassoon talks to him about enjoying hunting, being artist and poet before the war. So through all these experiences with the patients, Rivers realizes that they're human beings, they have emotions, they have feelings, and he treats them as people. However, Yellen sees them as just a tick list of curing them quickly, getting them out of the way, and he sees them as inferior beings who are weak and who he is more powerful over, and that they should respect him and that they should be grateful to him. So the views on how they treat their patients is completely different. So to conclude, comparing both characters, I would have to say that Rivers is definitely similar to Yelland, but only to a certain extent. And going back to the introduction of patriarchal roles and bringing in gender roles, Rivers' character embodies the feminine role. This is shown again when he's called a male mother, for he cares and fusses over his patients like they were his children, something a mother would do. And he causes his patients to talk, something which goes against patriarchal societies and Edwardian societies, is these patients who are men are classified under the stereotypical view of expected not to open up and be emotionally vulnerable and broken, like women. And thus, through this novel, Barker is able to shatter the perfect perception of men through Rivers, his method, and his patients. Yelland, on the other hand, does not encourage the patients to open up at all. Instead, he classifies them as being cured or uncured, so indicating that what they're going through is merely a period of illness which they can overcome in no time. And through Yelland's character, he takes on the male role of things, whereby he respects the patriarchal and Edwardian society simply by fixing the patients up quickly and allowing them to keep their stereotypical perceptions of perfection. Thus, to conclude, in my opinion, I would have to say that even though these two characters share some similarities, they're in actual fact extremely different, for they stand on completely different levels of ethical and moral values and have very different outlooks on the patients and society.